lovelies, my name is Stephanie and welcome back to my channel. On my channel I talk about trans topics, a little bit about my life, mostly trans topics, but that's because I'm a self-involved narcissist. So welcome! Today I am very excited to be joined by someone amazing. I just want to say quickly before I introduce him, this is my first YouTube collaboration. I'm very, very excited to welcome this lovely, lovely human who I follow, who I admire very, very much. Please welcome Chloe from The Chloe Connection.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me, Stephanie.
You're so welcome. Thank you for being here. So today, as you can probably tell by the title of this video, and you can probably tell if you have come over from Chloe's lovely channel, today we are talking about the worst things about being trans. Now this list could go on and on and on and on and on, but we have managed to kind of make it more concise, bring it down to some points that we're going to talk about. I'm very excited to talk about this, even though it's the worst things about being trans, but I think they definitely need to be talked about. So yeah, let's get started.
So the worst things about being trans. First on our list is gender dysphoria, and I literally wrote in my notes that this is not a hard one to think up because I think this is something all of us, or at least almost all of us, can probably relate to. Just this constant struggle and stress and distress of feeling like, I know for me, it's like my body doesn't match who I see on the inside or who I feel like on the inside, or that's how it was for so many years. And also the dysphoria of like people not seeing that same person that I identify as, and just creates a lot of discomfort, creates a lot of just a mismatch, really. Like I have to compartmentalize like who I show myself to the world as and who I actually know myself to be, like in my internal world. And after a while, like couldn't really deal with that anymore. Like the dysphoria was honestly a big motivator for coming out and transitioning in the first place.
Well, I mean, you're completely right in terms of, you know, first of all, you're completely right in terms of it not being a hard one to think up, but kind of dealing with all of it and dealing with it, because a lot of the time you're dealing with it on your own, it is something that just eats away at you. Gender dysphoria, it's something that is so difficult to battle with because it's something that just never kind of goes away. I mean, it eases with more and more affirmations, but it's definitely, I think, a well-deserved kind of starting point on this list is the dysphoria that we feel as trans people and that we experience every day, which a lot of people outside of the trans community don't know how to empathize with or relate to. It's just a very strange situation to try and describe to other people, but the kind of constant goals that you're setting yourself that you may never reach, or the things that you see in your body that other people don't see and they kind of think you're a bit crazy for seeing them, and the mental health aspect of not knowing before you come out as trans or not knowing when to come out, it's all linked to that gender dysphoria. So definitely high on my list. So the next one is something that if you've been watching my channel for a little while, you know I won't necessarily have the most experience in because I transitioned very, very young and I had puberty blockers before I went through a male puberty, but there are so many issues and it's one of the worst things ever going through your transition and going through a second puberty after you've gone through that first one. So people who transition kind of around like 16, 17, 18 all the way up, it can be quite difficult to go through that second puberty because it is literally stripping your body of its natural, if not awfully rejected hormones that you do not want, and then putting in new ones, and your whole body changes, your whole mental health changes. So the next point to talk about is second puberty.
And second puberty is something I did experience since I started hormone therapy when I was right before I turned 25. So 24, almost 25 when I started. And it's like, I think simultaneously one of the best and one of the worst things in a way, because it's like finally my mind is getting more in sync, my mind and body are getting more in sync, but like puberty isn't fun. It's just like throwing your whole body into whack. Like I felt like, you know, things started clicking into place within those first few months of being on hormone therapy, of, you know, getting some of that estrogen and blocking some of that testosterone. But then, yeah, it's a whole process. I was about to jump into some other points, but we're going to touch on those later.
Oh, amazing. No worries. Well, I'll hand over to you for the next point then.
Oh, perfect. I'll keep talking. So next one is about passing, this whole concept of passing. And I know that that is a loaded word. It means different things to different people. Some people don't mind it. Some people hate it. Some people strive to pass. Some people have no desire to pass. But I think that's one of the worst things, is like this complicated pressure around passing, how, you know, especially for trans women, like we're expected to pass as cisgender women essentially. And, you know, depending on when we transition, depending on when we go on hormone therapy, like if we go through like that second puberty, we're going at an uphill battle. So there's a higher likelihood that we may experience the pain of not passing. You know, if we want to pass, we may not be able to pass, and that has very real, you know, personal consequences in terms of our mental health, but also really real social consequences in terms of, if we don't pass, people usually use that as an excuse to treat us as like being less valuable as people.
Yeah, it's a really difficult thing, and I think sometimes people assume it's only projected by people external to us, but a lot of passing pressure is also self-inflicted. I know for myself, growing up surrounded by cisgendered girls and women, young women in school, I held myself to very high standards that I couldn't achieve. I couldn't make myself shorter. I couldn't make my feet smaller. I couldn't do the things that I felt I needed to do in order to fit into this stereotyped ideal of beauty of what it's like to be a cisgendered woman, of wanting to pass like that. And it's something I've talked about before on my channel, is passing privilege and my kind of experiences with that. And I just want to say to everyone that's watching, you don't have to pass to be valid. You don't have to want to pass to be valid. If you do want to pass, that is also valid. There's no two ways around it. Everyone's transition is very, very different. But in terms of how difficult it is having that kind of self-inflicted and kind of projected from external wanting to pass, and how it can really interrupt not only, you know, as you mentioned, kind of social interactions, romantic interactions, it can cause a lot of additional dysphoria if you don't pass and people misgender you, especially if you're kind of further into your transition. I know that we've talked about a bit the fact that we're both very tall women, and the fact that sometimes people are very quick to kind of clock on and be like, you're a giant, what's going on? You know? So I think the idea of passing and the pressure of it is just so, it's so high, and it's a losing battle. It's you're pushing a stone up a hill. Do you know what I mean? There isn't, you're never gonna get to that ideal. I mean, I don't know if I'm speaking for both of us here. I know I'm speaking for myself, but even post surgery, post operations, post kind of HRT and things like that, I still in my mind have this idealized version of myself of how I want to pass. Can I make my forehead smaller? Can I have facial feminization surgery to kind of take back my chin and things like that? Like, it doesn't stop. The desire to look different is something that everyone experiences, but trans women and trans people experience it on steroids, and it's just such an unattainable goal, and it's just really difficult.
Yeah, it's an exhausting, constantly moving target.
Yep, it's not great. It's not great.
And I feel like we're laughing because it prevents us from crying. It's a way of coping. Yeah,
we're laughing to mask the pain. send hugs. But yes, that is absolutely one of the worst things about being trans. So next up on our list is minority stress. And what we mean by this, for people who might not know, is the kind of discrimination, the rejection of being trans people, not only as individuals, but in a group. We can be incredibly targeted for different prejudice attacks online, in person. It is an incredibly scary thing to be a trans person in a world where people are trying to deny your existence, and it does come from the fact that we are a minority. Trans people, trans women are a minority, and the crimes against us are specifically aimed towards us because we are trans and because that is how we are living our lives. And it is not only dangerous, in some parts of the world illegal, but it is just a terrifying thing when you're starting off your transition and all of a sudden you belong to this category that's so targeted and vilified. And you'll see it in the media a lot, from media outlets and things like that, of people who phrase things about trans people very differently than they would about cisgender people, and that is minority stress. That is the stressfulness of belonging to a minority.
I think you nailed it.
Thank you.
I don't think I have much more to add there. My
That's-
headphone also did die for a second.
That's absolutely fine. So let's move on to the next one, which is yours.
Yay, my favorite category. Being
Yay.
fetishized. Experiencing chasers. I feel like I don't experience this as much as some trans people, since I don't date men. I feel
Yeah.
like, you know, that is where most of the fetishization comes from, is from, you know, cisgender men. Usually cisgender heterosexual men, or cisgender men who have a crisis of sexuality and don't know what to do with their attraction to trans women. But it's still something that I've dealt with through YouTube. It's something I've dealt with in person. It's something I've dealt with on Facebook, like any social media, where just random men think that it's okay to say all sorts of sexual things. I mean, I feel like it's like the equivalent of getting dick pics from a guy, but it's specifically targeted towards trans people. It's creepy, it's icky, it's gross. I feel like it's really tied into one thing that didn't even include on this list, I don't think, was also like kind of a loss of privilege from coming out as trans and coming out as a woman. And I think that's something that happens when you throw in the sexism with the transphobia, and a nice little complicated mix of yet another minority stressor.
Absolutely. And I mean, as you said, you might not experience this kind of as much because you don't kind of date kind of cisgendered men and things like that, but we still, I mean, just having an online presence, you experience it. I get unsolicited, very graphic messages and photographs to my Instagram on a daily basis. I got 22 message requests today, and at least 70% of that was from unsolicited cisgendered men, and the rest was mostly spam. So the chasers are real. This is something I have kind of first-hand experience with. I identify as kind of a bisexual trans woman, and so up until very recently, my dating experience had solely been kind of cisgendered, heterosexual, or gender sexuality questioning kind of guys, and it is real. And let me tell you, since being post-op, I have not gotten half as many messages as I used to, which just goes to show that even the guys who claim to be the good guys, like, I'm not a chaser, as soon as you're post-op, it's like, oh, you don't have that part of you that I'm fetishizing anymore. And it is kind of, I don't understand why people think it's okay to view trans people as less than or a fetish. It is bizarre to me, and it's just, it makes dating really depressing because you never know if a guy is kind of into you for the right reasons or if he's fetishizing your body. And it's just, I mean, I love how you said it's icky and it's gross, because it is. That is exactly how it feels. You feel almost repulsed by these people who are like, I only want you for one very specific thing. I'm having a sexuality crisis. I think that you're basically a piece of me that I can use as my experimentation. So it is just, yeah, chasers and fetishization. It's, I mean, it's not good. It's never been good, and it's always happened, and it's just definitely belongs on this list.
Yes, it does. That's
Yeah.
the nice complexities of dating as a trans person. Just
I mean, that-
a trans-specific form of being objectified rather than being seen as a full person.
Absolutely, yeah. The next point that we were going to go into, I'm actually going to pause that one because there's something that you mentioned that was really interesting, which is the loss of privilege. And I think that people, especially people who transition in their kind of older kind of life, past the age of, you know, obviously I transitioned as a very, very young teenager, but over the age of 18 as an adult, when you transition, you have experienced privilege kind of before. For a lot of people, kind of, for MTF women, you experience kind of male privilege and that idealism, and then all of a sudden you lose all of your privilege, and it's very, very different. I'm very aware of the fact that I still have more privilege than certain minorities within the trans community, but you do really notice that kind of shift of privilege change and how people view you based on just that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that's something that I noticed a lot, like, in school and the workplace. I think we're probably the most prominent examples of just like, oh, like, you know, I'm not taken as seriously, people are ignoring me, people are talking over me, people are just acting like my thoughts, opinions, feelings, whatever, don't matter or don't matter as much as the men in the room typically. And it's also one of those things where it's sometimes hard to parse out of like, you know, where is this coming from? Is it a loss of privilege because I'm trans? Is it a loss of privilege because I'm a woman? Is it a loss of privilege because I'm a trans woman? And like Stephanie said, like, I realize I still have a lot of privilege compared to, you know, a lot of other people in the community, being somebody who is white, somebody who comes from a middle class background, somebody who has had the opportunities to have education, higher education, like all these opportunities have been granted. But there's still this very distinct loss that happens for, at least for trans women. You know, just as a side note, you know, it's obviously not my experience, but you know, I know trans men who kind of talk about it from the opposite, so to speak, side of like gaining privilege, because now identifying as a man, now being seen in the world as a man, and it's just interesting is a nice way to put it, how much we tie into these identities like gender.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Sorry, I know that wasn't on the list, but I really, when you mentioned that, I just wanted to jump on it.
Yeah, that just popped in my head because I recently did a video on that. So internalized transphobia, it's a delight. It's something that pretty much all of us probably, unfortunately, experience at least at one time or another. You know, broadly, it's this idea of all of the transphobic shit in the world around us, all the negative messages we get from, you know, all the bad things about being trans, like it's terrible, like we shouldn't exist, or we're subhuman, or whatever it may be. And, you know, we hear that stuff so much that we just internalize that and kind of project those negative messages back onto ourselves, maybe even back onto other people in the trans community, where we start putting these, you know, oppressive standards that people have for trans people onto ourselves, which, you know, creates dysphoria for one thing. It creates difficulties in passing because, you know, we internalize that culture of passing. That's a form of internalized transphobia. You know, I'm losing my train of thought here, but I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm getting flustered.
I completely agree that internalized transphobia is something that, I mean, it's similarly to kind of gender dysphoria and similarly to the kind of self-inflicted kind of passing desires and things like that. Internalized transphobia is something that I don't think is spoken about enough, because, I mean, a great example of this would be kind of different kind of internalized kind of phobias within the LGBT community, but smaller than that is within the trans community itself, as you said, because, you know, trans people put such an emphasis on passing, and it's only recently that we've kind of got into this ideal of like, I don't owe you, kind of that beautiful stereotypical ideal of what a woman or a man should be, and it's something that in the last kind of 10 years has really flourished as being like, I don't have to look a certain way to be valid and things like that. But that is really projected from the trans community. I find a lot of the time that it can come from kind of the older generation of trans people who have kind of been there, done that, and they're a bit like, oh, well, you know, if you're not passing, then kind of what are you doing and things like that. But then on the flip side, there are people who are just as accepting, but also people in kind of our age group and my age group and younger than me even, who are also equally as kind of transphobic towards other trans people because they're not doing what they think is their idea of a successful transition, because transitions are such kind of intimate things.
Speaking of transphobia, my camera just died the second we started talking about internalized transphobia and people having transphobia towards us, and right then my camera died. So clearly I need to replace my camera because it hates us and all trans people.
Yep, your camera is a fucking bigot.
Yeah. Fuck you, camera. I'm not a fan. No, it's my fault. Battery died. And yeah, welcome back to the video.
Even though there was no pause on your end,
There was
probably,
no
depending on
pause.
how
It'll
we
be
edit it.
edited out, absolutely. But welcome back, my lovelies. I'm still here with Chloe from the Chloe Connection. So, we were talking about internalized transphobia. I don't remember where we got to. So I don't know if it's just a good idea to kind of take that point again from the beginning, because, or maybe not the beginning. We did get very far into it. Summary. Internalized transphobia is bad. We hate it. Trans people can be transphobic to other trans people. And it is one of the worst things about being trans, that you have that internalized transphobia from your own community. And yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about. I'm sure there's quite a bit that will be left in, but internalized transphobia, not good. Do not recommend. 0 out of 10.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible. It's pretty much like all the awful stuff that society puts on us. We internalize it and experience it and treat ourselves awfully because of it, and it's great.
And that is internalized transphobia.
But I feel like one of your points was a perfect segue. Some of the points you made were a perfect segue into our next point of discrimination within communities. Because
thank you for making that excellent segue.
That can happen due to internalized transphobia and minority stress and gender dysphoria and people just being shitty.
Yep. Absolutely, it can. Yeah, discrimination within the communities, as you kind of briefly touched on there, is hugely prevalent in the trans community specifically, especially with things, messed up things like the LGBT alliance and trans exclusionary radical feminists, or, you know, TERFs, or, you know, let's just not give them a name if they don't deserve a name, and they're awful, awful people. So yeah, the discrimination within our own community is horrendous. Having protests from other people within those communities at our pride events and things, it's so strange. I mean, I don't know, I mean, I'm sure you feel the same, but it's just so strange that other people who struggle to come to terms with their sexuality, the realization of their sexuality, would have so much prejudice. And not everyone, you know, it's only certain groups, but so much prejudice towards people who are also struggling with their gender identity and often their sexual identity at the same time.
Yeah. It's like there's like some disconnect between empathy for themselves and empathy for others.
Yeah. I don't understand. I've never understood it. I've obviously experienced it. It's why it's on the list. It is a horrendous thing to experience, but I've just never been able to empathize with the idea that you feel the ability to be discriminatory towards someone within your own community and within a minority within a minority. We are a minority in a minority. So
right.
It physically upsets me to talk about because I don't understand why people do that.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's just like people, you know, think of being discriminated against by like cisgender gay and lesbian people in the community, and you know, it's like they forget about the discrimination that they have probably faced and probably still face as a result of, you know, being gay or lesbian. And it's like you forget about that, or it's like completely disconnected and compartmentalized when people then do the same thing to us that was done to them. It's hypocritical.
Well, yeah, that's 100% what it is. It is hypocritical and it's wrong, and I don't understand it. Chloe doesn't understand it. We don't get it. Why are you doing it?
So, stop.
Yeah. Bury that. Bury that. Amazing. So I think, you know, we've kind of touched it on that. That's terrible. Let's move on. Moving on to the next terrible thing, which is having to be patient, like extremely patient. Trans people. We have, I don't even know what to compare it to. I don't think there is anything to compare it to. It is non-comparative. We have so much patience because of how long it takes us to transition. This is obviously different in every country. Obviously, I'm from the UK, you're from the US, and it's just, I mean, I waited 10 years to have my gender reassignment surgery, and I waited 5 years to be prescribed hormones, and the constant kind of gender dysphoria over that kind of duration of time is crazy. So not only do you have this incredible patience, but you also have this incredible patience under an extreme amount of pressure.
Yeah. I've heard stories about how long the wait times can be in the UK, and I know like we can experience that too, but I don't think to the same extent. There's definitely so many loops and, you know, hoops and loops that we have to jump through, so much gatekeeping, and, you know, then there's the whole issue of it being cost prohibitive even if we can get to it, because half the stuff is not even covered by insurance here. I think part of the patience piece that came up to me when thinking up that point too is just like the patience of like waiting for, like, once we get hormones, like once we get HRT, like the patience of waiting for it to actually make changes, you know, for especially for people like myself who go through that second puberty and just like, all right, I got it, all right, now I have to wait like several years for the changes to really set in, because it's literally a second puberty.
It takes forever, and it is just that, because you can be prescribed hormones and blockers and all of these things, but you, like you say, you have to wait 6 months, a year, 2 years to see long-lasting results. I'm still waiting to see results from certain things of hormones I've taken. The only reason I got a bigger chest size is because I got fatter. It wasn't because the hormones did anything. So there are certain things that you kind of wait for and anticipate, and then nope. All that patience was kind of, and it tests you. It really tests you. It tests our strength as trans people. It makes us very kind of empathetic, kind of patient people to other people, which I think is something that's a very good thing about being trans. But yeah, having to wait, and the wait times and the patience that you have to develop, things like getting your name changed, having to wait for a minimum certain amount of years before you can apply to have your name changed, can be a really kind of soul-crushing thing. Over here, I had to be living as myself for 2 years before I could do a name change. So it's everything. Everything takes time. It is a long road.
Yeah. And a lot of things you're talking about shouldn't have to take as long as they do. Like the hormones part, the changes, that's because of fucking biology. But like all the systems and stuff should not take so much time, because countless stories and data and research that shows that, you know, prolonging care, denying care is very, very harmful to trans people, physically and mentally. Shocker.
Surprise! Telling us we can't be here we want to be for prolonged periods of time because
it's
of
bad for us.
Outdated thoughts. It's bad for us. Oh,
but
God.
Yeah, people in charge don't often care.
No, they don't. And I think that segues really well into the kind of process of transitioning, which you're going to talk a bit about, because I think, wait, did I start the last topic? Did you start the last topic?
I think we already covered the next point, whereas the process of getting access to medical transition stuff. We kind of...
Amazing. Yeah. Well, not amazing, obviously. Terrible thing about being trans.
Amazing that we were ahead of ourselves, but awful that is a thing that we even had to talk about in the first place.
We're two women who bring you the facts and do it without even realizing that we're doing it. So you're welcome.
We bring you all the joy, especially in this video.
Oh, God. I like how I pick the more depressing of the two for my channel. Like, yeah, it's time to be really sad, make everyone really upset. Amazing. Okay, not amazing. I need to stop saying amazing. I try to be so effervescently positive person. Not about these things. Do you want to take away the last kind of worst thing about being trans point on this channel?
I would love to, because I feel like this relates to most, if not all, of the points we've discussed already, but our final wonderful worst point is just people generally not understanding us, or, you know, even worse, not having empathy for us and then acting in ways that are aligned with that. In other words, being transphobic, being hurtful with their words or their actions. And I think that creates a lot of these other issues we have. It leads to minority stress because we live in harmful environments. We live with, you know, live around people who say and do harmful things to us, whether it's like in our immediate vicinity or online, whatever it may be. Our healthcare is delayed. We have to go through all these hoops because people don't understand us or they can't empathize with our struggles. And then we have people in our own community that can't empathize with us, like in the, you know, LGBT community. The people who aren't trans sometimes don't empathize with us, and then we have other trans people who don't empathize with other trans people. It's just so many problems. Like, I like to say that general. Like, I like to think that, you know, you don't have to understand us to care about us, you know, and at the very least, like, we're not getting in your way. We're just trying to live our lives and just do what everybody else is doing, like trying to live and, like, you know, have a good time while doing it. Like, why can't we do both of those? So, like everyone else, yes. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, this is the thing, and I think that we both are kind of examples of this, is we are people who are striving and kind of going out of our way to educate people to understand more about being trans. And, you know, these channels, I mean, we don't make huge amounts of money. This is something that we do because we want to educate people. We're very small channels. We're not, you know, and it is just the craziest thing that people, I don't expect everyone to understand. I don't expect everyone to be able to necessarily empathize, but I just don't want you to get in my way if you don't. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not here for the idea of me living authentically is somehow impacting your life negatively.
because it's definitely not. Just let me do me, you do you. If you don't understand me, that's fine. And we'll just kind of move on. But if you have a desire to educate yourself, which I think a lot more people are kind of coming to terms with kind of in the last kind of 5-10 years, is that desire to kind of understand more about trans people, the LGBT community, things like that. The lack of understanding is something that trans people, we have learned to cope with over time. It's something that comes part and parcel with transitioning, and it sucks and it is the worst. But just don't blindly discriminate based on a lack of knowledge and understanding, which leads to fear. Don't do that. Go and educate yourself, or leave us the fuck alone. Those are your options. Pick a lane.
Yeah, it's like, be nice and supportive or ignore us, you know?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, you can either support us and help us on our goals, or just go about your business. Why go out of your way to make our lives harder? Don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. But that is an excellent point to kind of end on.
Like, I don't get it. That's the summary.
That's it. The whole video. We don't get it. We don't get why these things are terrible. We don't get why we have to experience these terrible things. But there they are. That was the video. You're welcome, internet. I would just like to say a very quick thank you to everyone watching who persevered through the camera struggles. Thank you so much. It was unexpected, unprecedented, and it was very frazzling for myself. But we survived thanks to Chloe, actually. She calmed me down. She was like, it's going to be fine. So thank you very much. Please tell my lovely subscribers where they can find you.
Oh yes, so my channel is The Chloe Connection, so if you just throw that in the search engine, you should be able to find me. And
yep, and I'll link it below. Oh.
Yes. You can also, find me on Instagram, also under The Chloe Connection, if you want to see pictures of my cat, because that is mostly what my Instagram is.
The cat's the best. I feel like you could utilize the cat in all videos for all of the clickbait ever.
I mean, you can throw her up right now.
Oh, let's do a quick surprise appearance.
She's gonna hate me.
From Tipsy,
she has her own fan club on my channel, basically. Look at her grumpy little face.
Well, if you want to see more of Chloe and Tipsy the cat, who is clearly very uncomfortable being there, then please head on over to her channel and check her out. Her videos are amazing. She just hit 5,000 subscribers. Big milestone. So lovely to have you. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you to Tipsy for also appearing on my channel.
She had no choice. But thank you for having me. This has been a delight.
Yeah, it's been lovely. And that is it from me, guys. So I hope you have a lovely day. Make good choices. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down because, whatever. But thumbs up are best. Subscribe, notification bell if you want to, but I put out a lot of stuff, so that's a lot of drama, so I wouldn't worry about it. And I will see you next week for another video. Bye!